you get a lot of bands who come in who maybe can't play their material as perfectly as the listener might expect, because the digital recording process has really changed the way a lot of music is written and created, and what expectations performers have for themselves of, like, how well should they be able to play their music.
Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If you'd be so kind, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah. Hi, my name's Chris Grigg. I am the drummer for Glorious Depravity.
And Chris, how would you describe the music of Glorious Depravity?
Glorious Depravity is death metal. Kind of has like I guess we could say late 90s, early 2000s American feel to it. When we were starting, we were listening to, just the classic American stuff, especially Deicide, Cannibal Corpse, Suffocation. Monstrosity comes up a lot when people talk about us. We also, it's a little outside of the American thing, but very much, the band, we talk about Old Vader a lot, which is, appropriate for the time period.
So I spoke to you back in 2023, and I also spoke to your vocalist, Doug, back in 2020, not long after the album came out. With Doug, we discussed a little bit of the history of the band and how it came together and what the goals were originally for Glorious Depravity. Would you mind just talking about that a little bit? Because you were actually one of the co-founders of the band, right? With your guitarist, Matt?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right. So it kind of happened, we didn't set out, like it wasn't one day we're like, we're going to start a death metal band. Matt and I decided we were going to start just working on some music. And I had actually not played drums in a band for a pretty long time. This was, let me look at my own Wikipedia page, or not Wikipedia page. I'm sorry, Metal Archive page. The band says so. Metal Archive says that we founded in 2017, which sounds about right. So maybe a year before then, Matt and I started working on some stuff, and I hadn't drummed actively since probably 2012. So I'd been away from it for a little while, but we got back into it, and we were writing kind of, I guess we could say, thrashy black metal. And as we released a demo under the name Death Icon, and as we were writing, it was going more towards death metal, as just more and more. And then we wanted to put it together as a full band. So we started inviting friends, and one thing led to another, and we wound up with a full lineup, and we changed our name to Glorious Depravity. And the black metal went away, especially as more people joined, and kind of the rest is history.
So, on that point, why did the black metal go away? Was it the input of the other members, or did you feel, because you're so associated with black metal through Woe, that you wanted a project that was very different?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's. I don't totally remember. We were with all things, we were kind of writing what we wanted to hear. I remember that Matt and I had a few songs where some death metal influence started creeping in, and those riffs and those songs wound up being our favorites. And I think it was kind of just a mutual agreement that we wanted to start focusing on that more. I think because it was just what we felt, what we were especially motivated by, and what we just wanted to do something that was different from our other projects. But the being different from the other projects was secondary to working on the music that moved us. Around this time, Matt joined Woe also. So, we were spending a lot of time playing black metal. Maybe that influenced it a little bit, but, I was writing all of the Woe songs on guitar. So it's not like Matt was like spending all day, every day writing black metal for Woe. But I think it was really just, this was the music that was speaking to us right then. And as the guys joined the band, of course, they all agreed with us. And, and especially with Doug being, probably, I don't know, like one of the best death metal vocalists anywhere right now. So it was really just like the natural thing to do.
You had mentioned that you had not played live drums in a very long time. As a drummer, because the music for Glorious Depravity is actually quite intense, especially on the drumming end. It's fast, it's technical. Did it take you a while to get your chops back?
From what I remember, I mean, I don't really remember the timeline, but I can tell you that around the time I started working on music with Matt, and I don't remember the order of operations. I don't remember if this started before Matt and I started playing or after, but I was taking lessons with Lev from, of course, Woe and Krallis and Scarcity and a million bands. So I had, if I remember correctly, I started rehearsing just playing by myself, and then there's a lot of muscle memory, and like I'm not like the most sophisticated drummer, so getting back to like some approximation of where I used to be, it's not like I was doing anything that was like so technical that it needed some like super high level of prowess. So if I remember correctly, I got more or less up to where I remembered, and I do remember years ago, I had felt like I hit a plateau, and I was having trouble really getting faster and more consistent, and just all of the things that a kind of primitive metal drummer really needs. So I started working with Lev on how I could break, get across that get over that plateau and continue climbing. So working with Lev really unlocked some new skills and helped me find like a new target and figure out how to really just level it up. So that helped a lot. And I can't say that it was overnight, but I know that was ongoing around the time that Matt and I were working on stuff together, and it really, really helped a lot.
So if you don't mind sharing the advice that Lev gave to you, what was it that you did to bridge that plateau? Was it purely on the physical side, or was it more like changing your approach to the way that you play drums, or the way you thought about your technique?
No, with Lev, most of what we worked on was about, really, a lot of it was about loosening up and changing how tense and rigid I was while I was playing, and really finding ways to feel comfortable playing at higher speeds without straining. And I've since then, over the years, I've built on that and found a lot more, like even more comfort. A lot of his thing is about like feeling loose and being comfortable making like big movements while playing fast, which can sound and be kind of counterintuitive. Like very often as you play faster, your movements become smaller and more efficient. But there are certain speeds where you really still want some kind of like bigger fluid movements. And even as you try to make things more efficient and kind of cut down on range of motion, you still want to be loose and you don't want to be tense and straining. So a lot of what he and I worked on was really just figuring out, like finding my way to play fast without that tension and rigidity. And it was really transformative. It really helped me just figure out how to not tense up right away.
I mean, it's a funny thing because people will tell you not to tense up, and you sometimes don't know that you're tensing up until you're doing it, until somebody points it out to you and like physically pushes your shoulders down or whatever. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. For him, it's a lot of like, he'll be like, yeah, your arm, like he'll be like, your arm, you're only moving this part of your arm and the rest of it is just like totally stiff. And if you loosen up a little bit there, you'll find that you have like a lot more power and a lot more endurance. Because, and really, I think a lot of that comes down to some combination of using motion more efficiently and like distributing, like using motion more efficiently and getting some torque from the like a larger arm movement, and distributing the effort of a movement across larger or more muscle groups. But of course, like as you get faster, you do have to start clamping down on some of that again. But the idea is like you still don't want to be too tense.
Yeah. We spoke about some of the influences that you brought into Glorious Depravity. As a drummer, was there any specific drummers, other drummers that you were looking at from that era, that '90s death metal era?
So, you know, I yes, to a point. I mean, at the time, I was listening to Vader a lot. So Doc, of course, was like probably probably like one of, if not my biggest influence. I really like Paul from Cannibal Corpse, who's not like the fastest or flashiest guy, but you know his drumming. You know his drumming is like very musical, and you can tell that he has, you know, he's always been a key part of their songwriting and their song structures, and there's like a cohesion and an awareness of what the guitars are doing, what the riffs are doing. And, you know, I think like as someone who's played guitar and written songs for a long time, like, and, you know, we probably talked about how in Whoa, I'm always thinking, even when I wasn't drumming, frequently I was still writing all the drum parts and thinking about that union of guitar and melody and intensity and the drums aren't something that you just like put on top of it as an afterthought. It's like part of it whole, you know, along the way. So yeah, those guys a lot. You know, I was listening to a lot of old Suffocation. So Mike Smith, of course, was a big one. But then, you know, I'm still, you know, I'm still a like black metal guy. I can't really get away from like Faust's drumming on the early Emperor albums. Like there's like a certain primitive simplicity that really resonates with me, where it's like it's not the flashiest, but like again, like those are drums and Samoth on the later Emperor recordings. Like those are drums that he's part of the songs. And you know, it's not the flashiest, but it's like it's in many ways like all of those drummers have like some of the most memorable and important drum parts that I can think of in metal.
Yeah.
Or at least in like the extreme metal that I'm listening to.
Yeah. When you write songs, does it always start with you and Matt?
I mean, back then it did. Now it's a completely different. I mean, everything about the band is different. So now, you know, now it's always me and any number of other people. I don't think, I mean, sometimes somebody will come in with a riff, but most of our writing happens in the room. And it's always me and, you know, me and any number of other people from the band. So a lot of the songs on the new album were written as like in pairs. So there are a few songs that are very much me and George songs. There are a few that are me and Matt songs, and then there are a few that are everyone songs. And even, you know, even when something is for instance, me and George song, we still always take it to the band and then like final tweaks are made. It's not like we like put it in front of them and say like, here's the song, learn it. So it's always a collaborative process. It's just a question of like along the way, how much input do people have? And that's really entirely just about like who was able to make it to rehearsal that day.
Okay. As somebody who spent so much time working on the songwriting by himself with Woe, what's the collaborative process been like for you?
I mean, it's awesome. It's great. I really, when you really click with somebody and you have like a good back and forth, you can really accomplish great things. So, you know, with Glorious Depravity, like no matter who is there, the process is pretty much the same. It's a lot of like, you know, somebody has a riff or plays an idea on guitar, and then we will either immediately suggest some ideas where it's like, oh, that makes me think of ABCD. Like, what if you tried playing it like this? And then we'll put some drums to it, and we'll just sort of play around with variations until it lands correctly, till it feels right. And you know, some riffs and some songs and some arrangements need a lot more work than others. there are a few that just sort of come out finished. And then there are some that need, we wound up workshopping and adjusting and tweaking and tweaking and tweaking for a really long time. But, every song is different. So you go, you do what the song needs. You go where the song takes you, and it's done when it's done.
On this latest album, which song do you think took the longest to finish?
Oh, Carnage of the Margins.
Oh, really?
Carnage of the Margins, I think, took a long time. Necrobotic Enslavement took a bit of time. Sulphurous Wind, no, Sulphurous Winds didn't. Scourge by the Wings of the Fell Destroyer took a while, but then Strip Mine Flesh Extractor, that like practically came out finished. That was Strip Mine Flesh Extractor. George and I did that. Those are George riffs. And that was the last one we did. And we actually thought we were done writing for the album. And there was a night where he and I were the only ones at rehearsal. We were like, let's just do, what do you got? And it just came out. So, it's, you never know. Sometimes it just hits you.
Whose idea was it to have the Aqua Teen sample at the end of Strip Mine?
I think, I don't know. I wasn't there. I wasn't there when they were putting all of that together. I think it was probably either John or Doug, but I couldn't say for sure.
So when we spoke in 2023, you mentioned that you were finishing up the demos for this album. The album is out now. It's called Death Never Sleeps and is released by Transcending Obscurity Records. You spoke a bit about the more collaborative process that this album went through, but with regards to like maybe the songwriting or the style, did you go into it wanting to do anything different than the first album?
I think we all wanted to push the intensity and push the speed and maybe even narrow the focus a little bit more. Like if you go back to the first album, you can really hear that you can hear the black metal influence still. I mean, a couple of the songs on the first album were modified, like heavily modified, rewritten versions of Death Icon songs. So you can still hear some of that black metal peeking through. Or maybe it's just more obvious to us because we know, but it's there. And you can hear just like more varied influences on the first album, which funny enough, some of the reviews for the new album cited their preference for that first album because of those things. They felt that the new album was maybe a bit too samey or, a bit too one note. But then other reviews, of course, and other feedback saw those things as assets, that it was, single-minded and just like a, punishing, aggressive, straight ahead bulldozer, etc. But, for us, we really wanted to push that intensity and push that technicality and, push the speeds and all of those things and really hone in on the qualities of the first album that we liked. We just wanted more of it.
You recorded the first album yourself in your rehearsal space. This time you handed the recording duties to someone else. Why was that?
Well, we wanted to. I mean, there were a few reasons. I mean, the first was like sheer practicality, right? Like I did not have the bandwidth to do the album, like full stop, right? Like even if I wanted to, even if the band wanted me to, there wasn't the time. I took on way too much last year, and there just wouldn't have been space for it. We also, like, the process of recording in our rehearsal space wasn't really that fun. It's a little cramped, and but beyond that, like we can't quite get the sound that we wanted. I mean, I've done a lot of recordings in that room, and I'm pretty happy with them, like all things considered. I mean, for a rehearsal space, I think I can get some pretty good tones out of it. But at the end of the day, it's still a rehearsal space, and we still have some shared walls. And I have a lot of, even now, like I have a lot of recording sessions where I'll be doing demos or something, and if there's a band in the next room playing, you're just done. You're done. You can't record.
Right. Yeah.
We share a wall with Incendiary, who are like this unbelievably amazing hardcore, like kind of metallic hardcore band. And it's awesome because we get to listen to Incendiary all the time, but it's terrible because because we have, you're trying to record vocals or you're trying to record drums and you stop and, or like doing vocals is funny because like you'll hear Incendiary really low in the background. So it's not ideal.
Right.
So, we don't have the space for it. But then on top of that, like we really wanted to work with an engineer and mixer who has their own perspective and has their own experience and could lift the music really to be everything it can be. We wanted that sound, and I think I'm pretty confident with my mixes, but I'm not that kind of death metal engineer. So we wanted that experience and we wanted that recording. So we were like, who's the guy in the area who could do that? And Joe is just like, his resume is incredible. And so that was like kind of a no-brainer.
So I'm familiar with Joe from his work with Suffocation. Specific to Glorious Depravity, what did you want him to bring to the sound of the album? What did you feel was missing the first time around that you wanted him to add to this one?
We wanted a more polished, more produced, cleaner, more like arena produced death metal sound. My mixes tend to be a lot more natural and dynamic and all these things, which isn't to say that Joe's mix doesn't sound natural, but his processes are just very, very different from mine, and his gear is very different, and his mixing techniques, just every step of it is different from the way I do things. And if we had gone with me, I think it would have sounded better than the first one for sure, and it would have sounded more polished and more pro, just as a natural result of having more years of doing this. But with Joe, it's just on a whole other level because the guy is like such a pro. And we got exactly what we set out, what we hoped to get. I mean, he has his techniques and his process, and he just nails it. He just knocked it out of the park. We got something that was really exactly what we hoped for. Yeah.
So I've been asking people a lot about the recording side of things, and this past year I got a chance to speak with guys like Colin Marston and Greg Wilkinson, and really focus on that part of making music and making metal. I'm curious, when you're comparing and contrasting your approach with Joe's, what would you say his, I don't know if philosophy is the right word, but his approach as an engineer is, and how it differs from yours?
So Joe, I'm a get the performance right, do it right kind of guy. Joe takes a much, I think, more maybe pragmatic approach, which is very, very typical in like more, bigger productions, which is, a lot more willingness to fix things in the mix, or, do editing, or, do punch-ins and, things like that. And, he does the full sound replacement of drums and all of that stuff, whereas I'm a lot more like, nah, man, like you can do that better. Like punching in one drum fill is dumb. Like just play the part and like just get it right and get it tight, because I think that like you want to capture that performance. And so I think I'm a bit more of a purist about getting things right the first time, and he's a lot more pragmatic of like, nah, let's like, I'm gonna edit this and make it all perfect. And the modern death metal listener wants things to be like mechanically impossibly perfect, so I'm gonna go in and make things mechanically and impossibly perfect anyway, so don't stress about getting everything 100%. Like we just need enough that I can edit it, which I think is also a response to the reality that a lot of extreme metal engineers have, which is you get a lot of bands who come in who maybe can't play their material as perfectly as they, the listener might expect, because the digital recording process has really changed the way a lot of music is written and created, and what expectations performers have for themselves of like, how well should they be able to play their music. There are a lot of bands who can record an entire album without ever knowing how to play their song all the way through, and they write it directly into Pro Tools and they punch it in a riff at a time, and that's what they release. And they might have written the whole song that way. And, that's neither good nor bad. That's really just like or whether you think that's good or bad is really, really up to you. That is the reality of it. And you get a lot of bands, and I'm not speaking for Joe, I'm speaking for myself. Like, I've recorded a lot of bands who come in and they just can't play their material as well as they'd like. And I've been there too. Like, I've been there on drums, especially, where it's just like, I go in and I can't play the material. I can play it well enough to play it live, I can play it well enough at a rehearsal, but I can't play it well enough to record and make it perfect. Now, in the case of Glorious Depravity, we were over prepared. We came in extremely prepared, because I was an absolute maniac about recording demos. And I bullied my entire band into recording demo versions of every single song on the album. I think we did a couple demos, and I was going in by myself and I was just recording myself playing the whole album on drums again and again and again. We mapped out all of the clicks. I had everyone. We have full demos of the whole album. So, and I made sure that when I went in, I had been recording myself and I had been, analyzing like just what were the spots I was struggling with and what were the spots where my fills weren't quite up to it and this, that, and the other. And so by the time we came in, we had all recorded the album multiple times. Like, we had done the whole studio process in some approximation of my standards. So, like, not as perfectly as I would have demanded if we were trying to release it, but a lot more pre-production than I think most bands are doing. So when we came in, we were ready, and I was like, I mean, I don't know, I don't want to sound like arrogant, but like I was very ready to record. And Joe himself kept remarking like, God damn, like, I can't believe how tight you guys are, how ready you guys were to record. And I think that I like to think that a lot of that comes through in the final mix, because it did mean that he comes in expecting to have to like edit and tweak and perfect things. And we started from a really high level. I mean, you can listen, we have all like a lot of rough mixes that we would get after leaving the studio or like before leaving the studio. So it would be like unedited takes, and like, it sounds good. My drums sound awesome, even without any of the studio magic in there. I was ready. So, so we over prepared, but I think that even in a world of modern Pro Tools editing and replacement and stuff, like, I think that still shines through in the final recordings. And then of course, when we play live, like we're coming in there with the benefit of just having some perfectionists in the band.
So I think I know what drum replacement is, but I'm not 100% sure. Can you explain it to me again? Just so I know what it actually is.
Yeah. So, I mean, so I need to be honest, like we're verging into one of these territories where like a lot of people, especially listeners, so like especially people who are not performers, start to like get this like almost like prickly elitism, or this sense of like, oh, that's not right, you shouldn't do that.
Yeah, right.
You should leave things, and there are engineers who feel that way. Like personally, when I mix, I try not to use and do any kind of replacement. Like I'll for death metal especially, I'll usually blend, or I'll use like a kick drum sample, because you want that perfect like mechanical typewriter clicking kick drum.
Yeah.
Woe, when Woe plays live now, like we use a trigger because I want that sound, that like impossibly clicky or whatever sound, at least blended in with a microphone. But so talking about drum replacement is a thing that it's still divisive even in 2025 and AI is ruining music. Sound replacement is still a thing that upsets people. But what it is, you can do, there's like mild and extreme versions of it. You can, on the mild side, you can just take all of your microphones, your drum mics, and through magical computer processes, you can also trigger additional sounds that play simultaneously with them. So you can blend in like a pre-recorded snare drum every time the recorded snare drum hits. And what you can get is you can completely replace the sound. Sometimes you don't like the original snare drum sound and you just want to use this pre-recorded one that sounds killer. Sometimes you blend them together where you'll take the one you recorded and then you'll mix in like a lower level, you'll mix in another snare drum and it'll fill it out across the spectrum or the audio spectrum, or you'll get some like missing tones that you think makes the snare drum sound fuller and bigger. And these typically, like, I think a lot of people think that like when they hear triggers or sound replacement, they think that you immediately get this perfect performance just from doing that. And in reality, it can like, you usually get like, you keep the dynamics. Like you don't want every hit to be 100% unless you're playing kind of music where you do. But you can get those dynamics, and samples done poorly or sound replacement done poorly can sound really, really, really bad. And it can really ruin a recording. But then you can also go even crazier. And a lot of the Pro Tools, like the really like maniacal psycho Pro Tools guys they'll nudge drums into place, so that it's like perfectly on the beat and it sounds like a drum machine. And you can essentially like take a human recording and like turn it into a drum machine. To me, that's not a thing that I have any interest in doing with my drums, but it's a thing that people can do, especially in extreme metal, especially in death metal, especially as bands are get faster and more technical.
So we were discussing the production of the album.
Yep.
Do you want to say anything about the gentleman who mastered it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know Ryan super well. I mean, he's just, I mostly know him just from being like friendly on the internet, and he does killer work. He has a great reputation, and he wound up being like just so easy to work with. Just awesome. Very, very prompt, very, very fast, very prompt, very professional. And I mean, Joe's mix came out very finished. Joe, I think he masters most of his own stuff, and he has such like a well-defined process and sound that I truthfully don't know that his recording needed like a ton of work. But, like Ryan was somebody who I trusted to just take this killer mix and elevate it even more. So he did a great job.
So I think one last person that we need to mention who was involved with this album was Dan Seagrave.
Who? Yeah.
Finishing up the
yeah, seriously.
finishing up the trifecta of 90s death metal.
Yeah,
classic
yeah.
death metal.
Yes, little known, the little known underground artist. The overlooked. He never quite broke through, did he? I think we finally gave him a piece that'll stand the test of time. No, like honestly, we joke in the band that like this was all, like a psyop just to get Dan Seagrave, our logo on Dan Seagrave piece. He's I'm looking at it right now, and I sometimes like every time I see it, I stop and I just sort of stare at it like I can't believe that it exists. It's really like a lifetime. It's funny to say that someone else's work is a lifetime achievement, but like just being connected to this is such an unbelievable honor. The story with Dan is honestly very straightforward. Dan is very accessible. You email him, and that's kind of it. You email him, you talk about timeline, talk about costs, and that's it. I mean, I think in our case, Dan and Doug had a really clear concept for what he wanted. So the thing that I've learned working with a lot of artists, like, a great artist, they can hear the music and they can see the logo and they can know the genre and this and that. And a great artist, you can trust that with very little direction and very, very little guidance, if any, like they'll give you something that's amazing. Like I have trouble imagining that Dan Seagrave would have given us artwork that we found we were disappointed with. Like he's such a master that he just does amazing work. And that's true of all of the really great artists that I've worked with. But I found that when you come in with a vision and when you come in with, more details, and it doesn't always have to be prescriptive, it's not about like saying, I want you to use this color palette and here's a sketch for how it needs to look. And I want you to take my sketch and turn it into a painting. But when you can come in with a concept and when you can come in with a really clear pitch and sort of help, plant some seeds for how you want it to feel or elements of it, you can, you fill in some gaps. A great artist will then take that and run with it, and you can get, really, really tremendous results. And I think that what we have is the result of that, where Doug came in with a pitch and there were some emails going back and forth where they were talking about aspects, and then Dan started sending sketches and he sent a few different like concept ideas, and we refined it, and he had essentially some like not rough drafts of the whole thing, but like sketches of the just some general placement of things, and we talked about which one really resonated with us the most. And, I think that having a starting from a strong vision and at least like having some vocabulary available makes it a lot easier for the artist to end in a place that, that hooks up with the band's or, the musical artist's intent and capture that intent and present it in a special and powerful way. I think, for my money, I think like this is my favorite of Dan's artwork in a while. He does such amazing work, but I think that this one is especially really special because, and it's probably because of, all the things I'm talking about, that just being involved with the process and the way that Doug was.
Yeah. I mean, the artwork is something else. I will say, as much as I am kind of, on the fence of revivalism and all the recent like thrash and old school death metal revivals that we've had in the last 15 years, the fact that guys like Dan Seagrave and Ed Repka are getting work again makes me really happy.
Yeah.
Like, I'm glad everyone knows who those guys are again.
Absolutely. I completely agree. I mean, I think, they're like, Dan is the real deal. I mean, he is, and especially now with what's happening to artists all over the world, the way, AI and these like really powerful corporations are training, not just training software to rip them off, but then trying to convince the world that it's okay to then use these rip-off machines. And it's guys like Dan who defined a style, defined a genre, and are so crucial to the way we all think about death metal, and not just death metal art, but like, Dan Seagrave's paintings are critical pieces of death metal. And, he still is, he's such an important part of what we're all doing. And it's just like just a huge honor for us to be part of his history and connected with all of the amazing work that he's done. And we're proud to support that, as the rest of the world is trying to devalue his work and artists like him.
So the second Glorious Depravity album is called Death Never Sleeps, and it's out now through Transcending Obscurity Records. Chris, how can people find the album? What's the best way to get it?
So you can get Death Never Sleeps anywhere that you can think of to get music. So you'll find it, of course, on the Transcending Obscurity Ample page. You'll find it on Bandcamp. You'll find it on every streaming service. You can find merch right now through Transcending Obscurity's web store, where they have all kinds of shirts and all kinds of fun stuff. And soon you'll be able to find some merch directly through our Ampwall and Bandcamp pages. And of course, come see us live, and we'll have all kinds of goodies for you.
So I'm actually, I don't know if we talked about this before, but with you and the other guys in the band having so many things going on, does Glorious Depravity have a chance to play live? Do you guys have any plans for festival appearances or maybe a tour in the summer or anything like that? Yeah,
so we did a short tour after the album came out, just on kind of like through like sort of the Midwest, I guess we'd say, and parts of the South. And then we're working on stuff for later in the year. We have some ideas of things we would like to accomplish, but right now there's nothing on the calendar. But yeah, we are planning on doing some local and some regional, and with a little luck, maybe some international gigs. So if anybody is booking stuff, please get in touch.
Cool. Tell Matt and Damien from Horrendous I said hello.
No, I will.
And I believe Transcending Obscurity came up with 2 vinyl variants, right?
I think so. I haven't seen them yet. That sounds right.
Okay,
I'm looking forward to getting my hands on those, though.
cool. And if people want to get updates on the band and get more info about the shows that you mentioned or maybe upcoming releases, what's the best way to do that?
Our Instagram is probably the spot where we're the most active. You can just follow us, Glorious Depravity. We tend to post stuff there. And then before any new event, we'll be posting updates through our Ampwall and Bandcamp mailing lists.
Chris, it was really great catching up with you, and I appreciate how generous you were with your time, and also appreciate you making time for me so close to the holidays.
Yeah, man. Hey, I appreciate you following up and making this happen. And it's so great talking with you again.
Thanks again, Chris.
Thanks so much, man. I'll talk to you soon. Have a good one.